Mikkola! The Florida Panthers and Niko Mikkola agreed to a contract extension, and Aleksander Barkov pretty optimistic about his injury timeline.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, October 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show anywhere you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. You can do that all on FanDuel. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on another edition of the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers. And this is a later release of the show than expected. Woke up at around 7 a.m. to try to prepare for the show. And then around 8 a.m., Emily Kaplan of ESPN reported that the Florida Panthers and Niko Mikkola agreed to a long-term contract extension. And it took a few hours to find out a good amount of the details. We still don't have all of the details, as we'll talk about in this first segment. We're going to talk about that. We are also going to discuss in our second segment the Florida Panthers jumping up big time in franchise values across the NHL. And also in segment number 3, we are going to discuss some of the roster moves for the Panthers ahead of their preseason game in Tampa Bay, and Aleksander Barkov paying a visit to Miami Heat's training camp in Boca Raton. But yes, the big news of the day for the Cats is that the Florida Panthers and defenseman Niko Mikkola have agreed to an 8-year contract extension worth $40 million and at an AAV of $5 million. So this deal for Niko Mikkola will begin starting next year in the 2026-27 season, as he is currently making $2.5 million right now. He was set to be a UFA come July 1 of 2026, but the Panthers got it out of the way early. And this is kind of the new norm for the NHL as second pair defensemen. This is about the right price that second pair D-men are going to be making as the cap continues to rise throughout these next few years. So the Florida Panthers now have 11 guys on their roster that are signed at least through the 2030 season. And I've been discussing it a lot this summer. And the Panthers, just before I get to my point, the Florida Panthers will have 15 guys under contract come next year, as the salary cap is expected. The projection is $104 million. So the Panthers would only need to fill in 7 roster spots for their team come next year. So yeah, a core 11 now for the Florida Panthers. And this is a celebration once again of the success that the Florida Panthers have had over these last 3 seasons, making 3 straight runs to the Stanley Cup final and then winning it the last 2 years for the Cats. And I was saying that if the Panthers do in fact three-peat, yeah, you no questions asked, you extend Niko Mikkola. And I was saying during the summer that this when you're reevaluating everything for the Panthers and what their future is going to be, especially when Aleksander Barkov comes back, maybe it's during the playoffs, or maybe it's not until next season. That would be the time to reevaluate. But what I think versus what Bill Zito thinks are completely different. He runs the team. He's the Stanley Cup winning GM and a person who should be winning this Jack Adams and still hasn't won it yet. What he thinks versus what I think are two completely different things. And we were talking about all summer about decisions that are to come for Evan Rodriguez, Jesper Boquist on how to fit everybody under the roster. And I said that the best course of action for Niko Mikkola was to wait to see how where the Panthers would stand as far as the cap and the roster. And here's the thing. For Niko Mikkola's side of things, he's doubling his salary, and the guy who was drafted in the 5th round by the St. Louis Blues, he was not in the NHL when the St. Louis Blues eventually won the Stanley Cup in 2019. where they were last place in January and then made it all the way to third in their division, eventually winning in 7 games on the road in the TD Garden against Boston Bruins. He spent that year in the AHL for the San Antonio Rampage, former Panthers AHL affiliate, mind you. Played 70 games there that season, but then played some time with the St. Louis Blues, was up and down the very next season, and then eventually traded to the New York Rangers, who he did play in the playoffs there for the Rangers in 2023. That was the year that the Rangers got bounced in the first round against the New Jersey Devils after winning both road games in New Jersey and then eventually losing in 7 against them, and then signs the contract with the Panthers at $2.5 million for the 3 years. And he's been hasn't been a superstar, but he's been a quality depth defenseman who can activate into the rush, can protect around the net front, battle along the corners. I mean, one of the greatest memories that I've had of Niko Mikkola is all those times, especially twice in the Eastern Conference Final, and then once in Game 7 for Mikkola, pinning the puck towards the boards and showing off the muscle there as the opponent was not going to get the puck in Games 5 and 6 against New York, and then Game 7 against the Edmonton Oilers in 2024. Those are the standouts for me, as Niko Mikkola was on the ice for all of those occasions, and then how he was able to activate even more offensively in 2025, having a career high in goals, assists, points, plus minus, everything there for the Panthers, and truly earning this contract. I mean, it is second pair defenseman money for the Panthers. But I will say, based on the Florida Panthers situation, before we know anything about next year's salary cap, which I will get more to in segment number 2, I don't know if I like the term for Niko Mikkola. I was saying during the summer that if you push it to the 4 years for Mikkola and at least get it to a point where it's until 2030 to fit in for this championship window, because the Panthers are getting a lot older really fast. And this deal, he's already 29 years old. This deal begins next year. So this deal for Niko Mikkola will end at his age 38 season. The Panthers have already have a handful of guys who are in their 30s. Sergei Bobrovsky, Seth Jones, Brad Marchand. Aleksander Barkov is going to be approaching 30 very soon. Matthew Tkachuk will be in the next few years. But this is the move for in the short term, in saying that the Panthers still believe that in these next 4 or 5 years that they can maximize their window, even if it's not necessarily this year, because they're just so banged up, that they do believe that they want to give themselves multiple cracks at it in order to win the Stanley Cup and be a part of history and hockey lore. Even if it's not 3 in a row, they'll be part of some elite company in these next 4 or 5 years, which that's their hope of winning multiple Stanley Cups. But we do have details on Niko Mikkola's contract. As I'm refreshing Puckpedia, we don't have any news about the clauses for Niko Mikkola, so we don't know how many years it's a no move clause and if it's shifted to a modified no trade clause. By the way, because of the changes in the CBA come next year, the way you structure signing bonuses is going to be vastly different than what the NHL requires. So you can't have the minimum base salary of $1 million come the new CBA. So it's also the responsible thing for Bill Zito, and also with the blessing of ownership in Vinny Viola, because he's the one who cuts the checks, to put this all together and have their base salaries at $1 million. And by the way, Hart Levine also discussed that with the rise in salary cap and that base salary for players, that's actually going to go up with in the coming years for everybody. That includes the Barkovs, who his base salary is at 1 million. Matthew Tkachuk, Gustav Forsling, everybody who's under that threshold for the Panthers. But as far as the signing bonuses, this is what Niko Mikkola's looks like. Signing bonuses of 5.5 in year 1 and 2, 5.2 in year 3, 4 million in year 4, 3.1 in year 5, and then years 6 through 8 is 2.9. So it's a buyout proof contract for Niko Mikkola, as the rest of the contract, just like the rest of the contracts for the Florida Panthers, as they are looking to maximize their win and also keep the band together, because once again, it's a celebration of so much success for the Florida Panthers as they have taken the league by storm and have whenever opponents see that the Florida Panthers are coming to town, that they have to perform at their best, and the Panthers committing to their product, committing to guys who want to be here as well. And then, it takes two to tango as well. The players who actually do want to be here, who have had a whole bunch of success. And one more thing about Niko Mikkola, about some of the memories that stick out to me on just the nickname, the Condor. This year, he got a chance to be part of the Four Nations team for Team Finland. He's going to be part of that again in the Olympics in Milano Cortina. And the fact that he's been more of a playmaker, creator for the Panthers, especially in the postseason. There was one goal against Carolina where he's going towards the net front and going towards the short side. Not only does he score the goal, but in one stride, he's going from forward to skating backwards, going towards the corner, and just smooth skating for a big guy. And also another one off the rush where he's banging his stick on the ice, and then a backhand feed. I believe it was to AJ Greer for a goal in the conference final. To think that he also missed a game in that same series, like I mentioned. He missed a handful of games this year, and he's been extremely durable. He's been Mr. Durable for the Florida Panthers. Him and Sam Reinhart, for the most part, and both of them missed time in that conference final. But this is the commitment that the ownership is putting their money where their mouth is, and I will discuss this in segment number 2 on why the Florida Panthers might have made this move right now, because franchise values are up all across the NHL. Where do the Florida Panthers stand across the league? We'll discuss all this and more on today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And it makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding in on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Once again, visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Segment number 2 here on this Thursday, October 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. And big news for the Florida Panthers once again, with Niko Mikkola signing an extension with the Cats. And I wonder if this is the reason why the Florida Panthers decided to make this move now, because yesterday, Sportico released their annual article on where NHL franchise values stand. And I want to share my screen real quick on what Sportico's franchise values list looks like. So I'm going to full screen this there and take my video at least out. You can still hear my audio here. And look where the Florida Panthers stand. They stand at number 17th overall in the NHL and at worth $1.89 billion for their franchise value. And Vinny Viola purchasing the team back in 2013, 2014 for $250 million, investing in the product, putting the right people in the right places, him and Matthew Caldwell, although he's no longer with the organization, the culture is still bright in South Florida for what he's been able to build, hiring the right people like a Bill Zito, and then Bill Zito, a trickle-down effect, him hiring Paul Maurice, and then putting it all together for the Florida Panthers to win these back-to-backs, boosting the economy in South Florida throughout the last few years. And it's resulted in this 51% increase in franchise value for the Florida Panthers. But look at this. You could actually go back a few years on this article to see where the Florida Panthers stood then. And look at this. Back in 2021, before the Florida Panthers had even won their first series in 26 years, the Panthers were worth $520 million, and also 31st out of 32 in the NHL. The only one who was behind them was the Arizona Coyotes. As you can see in this article, it says Utah Mammoth, but they had not relocated yet to Utah. So now look at that. Look at the increase: a playoffs series win, a President's Trophy, so many banners, and a fan base that is consistently growing in South Florida. This Panthers franchise is definitely up there as far as respect across the NHL. And look at some of the teams who they're ahead of. They're ahead of two Canadian-based teams. Vancouver has been around for 55 years. They still had not won a Stanley Cup. Calgary, they are looking for a new arena. They are looking for a new arena. By the time that they open one, that is likely going to be a big rise, but they hadn't won the Stanley Cup since the late 80s. Colorado, as soon as they relocated, they won the Stanley Cup in their first season in the early 2000s, and then most recently in 2022, where they defeated the Tampa Bay Lightning in that series. You think that with the Pittsburgh Penguins having Sidney Crosby and how much marketing there is around him, the Panthers are also ahead of them as well. So there's look at the amount of teams that they are ahead of, and look at the ones that they trail. The Panthers, however, don't have the biggest jump in spots, though. The Carolina Hurricanes, who were 25th last year, jumped up 10 spots. They were a 49% increase throughout the NHL. They're now ranked 15. The Panthers are 2 spots ahead of them. But look at what separates number 17 to even number 13 for the NHL. That's only a separation of 0.05 billion. So, and I mean, that might not sound a lot to Vinny Viola, but it is quite a lot. But that with more success for the Florida Panthers, they'll be able to get there, if especially if they do three-peat. But it just goes to show how much a commitment to the market and the product really truly pays off. A new practice facility, new scoreboard, and also the fact that the Viola family also paid off all their debts that were owed to Broward County. They paid off $50 million that they had remaining to the county. So that increases an owner's net worth. And yes, there is, whenever you do have success in sports, that does come at the price of consumers, which more merch gets sold. The season tickets that fans purchase are going to be higher from one season to the next. I can only imagine what the prices are going to be to lock it in when the prices come out around January for season ticket holders. That a lot of fans are going to be in a little bit of a squeeze. Although I'm not a season ticket holder, I do purchase merch for the championships throughout the last few years, and I'm feeling a little bit of a financial squeeze as well myself with the amount that I've purchased. So it does come at the price of the consumer. But I also think about it like this: for all of us who, if you're coming here, you are a diehard Florida Panthers fan. You watch chances are you watch every single game, and chances are you want to know the ins and outs about what happens with the Panthers. And some of you guys are new around here as well, which we accept everyone. So you want to also learn a little bit more about hockey and the history of the Panthers as well. But when it comes to what the Florida Panthers have been through and and how they got here, I mean, I will take this over an empty arena and $10 tickets there. And I know that sometimes it's tough for fans to get in. I mean, opening night tickets, I haven't checked, but they're not the cheapest of tickets for right now for the fan to get in. But I'm looking across the rest of the schedule, and the Panthers are still a very inexpensive ticket as far as the resale market from what I'm looking at. So that's also the great thing about hockey in South Florida, that it's still at least a bit affordable, at least for the resale market. I don't know if season ticket holders are profiting as much as they were back then. If you're a season ticket holder, feel free to comment and tell me your experience about it. I really would like to hear from you and what you guys think about this. But for the economy and for South Florida, I mean, this is just great that the Viola family has brought us all of us some joy and years of putting their money where their mouth is as far as to build a product. And I had there was not necessarily a debate or an argument, but someone did comment saying that yes, it does come at the price of the consumer. But this commenter, I'm not going to say their name publicly, said that they should reward the people who have been there the last few years, even since the beginning, that they should reward them for being loyal. But I'm just telling you right now that that's not how these billionaire owners think. And it's also supply and demand as well. They know that they can increase because it's a hot product, and that if one person is not going to purchase season tickets, somebody else is going to be waiting in line to get them. And that's why there is a waiting list for lower bowl and upper bowl tickets, which supply and demand, something that we learned in our high school economics class, and even in our micro and macroeconomics classes as well, if you went to community college and even a 4-year institution. So that is the price of doing business for especially in the sports franchise, especially when you start winning. Right now, look at that baseball team in Little Havana. You can get tickets for $15 for a game. Yeah, you'll have a good time. You won't break the bank to go to a game, but there's no expectations on the team to win. What would you rather have? That's the question that I want to present to everybody out there who sees the franchise values and might have a problem with it. But that's just the price of doing business, and just what we've learned in our economics classes, and how it results even in our day to day, and even in with our favorite hockey team, the Florida Panthers. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss the Florida Panthers paying a visit to Universal, some roster moves, and Aleksander Barkov making a visit to Miami Heat training camp. We'll discuss all this and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Third and final segment here on this Thursday, October 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. And I know opening night is 5 days away, Aaron Ekblad days away, but there's still a way for you to consume Panthers hockey outside of the game tonight, that the Florida Panthers will be playing a preseason game against the Bolts from that place that used to be called Amalie Arena. I forget on the top of my head what the new name is called. That's my bad. But you can watch the Florida Panthers championship movie now available on ESPN Plus. And then on Friday, the Amazon series Face Off Inside the NHL will be released on tomorrow on Amazon Prime. So multiple ways of still consuming your Florida Panthers hockey before the Panthers are back in a regular season game on Tuesday, October 7th, when they take on the Chicago Blackhawks. But the Florida Panthers did pay a visit to Universal's Epic Universe and Universal Studios Florida, where the pictures surfaced of them visiting all the different worlds, Harry Potter world, Super Nintendo world. There's that picture of Sergei Bobrovsky with the Mario hat there right before they go on. And I've been to Epic Universe as well, and it's an outstanding theme park, and I hope that you guys get an opportunity to experience that yourselves if you guys do get the opportunity to do so. But this was if you listened to yesterday's episode, you would have known that they were going to this after the game in Orlando. But I hope that they had a great time. The Stanley Cup was also there. They also brought it to Diagon Alley there and took a picture right in front of the Dragon there. So that's pretty cool. But a few roster moves for the Florida Panthers that they made, and this is a lot. They've trimmed their training camp roster now to 29 players. So the players who have gone through waivers are Wilmer Skoog, Nolan Foote, and Mackenzie Entwistle. Right now it's 11:52 a.m. on a Thursday, so we will find out at 2 p.m. whether they do clear. So the guys who have been sent to Charlotte who do not need waivers: Josh Davies, Grayson Sachin, Hunter St. Martin, Anton Lundmark, Kai Schwent, Ryan McAllister, Ben Steves, Sandis Vilmanis, Jack Devine, defenseman Mike Benning, Nicholas Havorka, and Merrick Alsher have been sent. No waivers necessary for those guys. The guys who have been released from their PTOs: Johannes, Trevor Carrick, and Livingstone, and also released from their ATOs, but will report to Charlotte, Brett Chorsky, and Liam McKinsley, and also full release from their PTO, but won't return for the Florida Panthers at all. Ben Harper played a few games, but there's just a big logjam for the Florida Panthers defense. So which again, the Panthers have their top four solidified for the next at least 5 years. So there's going to be a switcheroo for the Panthers in the next few years as far as that bottom pair, who's going to be the partner for Dmitry Kulikov come next year. So there's only really one or two spots in the next few years for the Panthers defense. So will the Panthers make trades from the decor guys in their system in order to improve the roster in the next few years? So we will see what moves the Panthers do make. So, and also with the rise in franchise values across the NHL, which is over 100%, me thinks that the salary cap projection, which I forgot to mention in the previous segment, it's projected to be 104. What if it goes higher? So maybe that's also what Bill Zito and Vinny Viola are going to do, decided to do, excuse me, as far as knowing that they're going to exceed that and then still have a whole bunch of space in the future to still fill out the roster. Maybe make a cap clearing trade. Maybe. Who knows? But we will see. That projection won't come out until after the trade deadline. But they took care of business now, which is what matters. But Aleksander Barkov paid a visit to Miami Heat camp in Boca Raton at Florida Atlantic University, visiting the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat usually switch up their training camp. 1 year it's in the Bahamas, 1 year it's at Florida Atlantic. And Barkov, being a resident of Boca Raton, paid a visit. You saw him in the crutches and also talking to the team. And then Eric Spoelstra, he's not ignorant to what's going on in the community in South Florida. He's been with the Miami Heat for a very long time. He's been the head coach of the Heat since 2008, came up as the video coordinator for the team. And he had quite a lot to say about Aleksander Barkov, which Aleksander Barkov and his connection with the Heat go back years. In a December game in 2018, Aleksander Barkov was sitting courtside at a game. Dwayne Wade was going for a ball out of bounds, jumped into the stands, and he knees someone in the head as he's going into the stands. And who was that person that he kneed accidentally? It was the Florida Panthers captain, Aleksander Barkov. And then he apologized on Twitter later that night there. So big basketball fan for Aleksander Barkov. And also Eric Spoelstra got to talk about the leadership and how much he values Aleksander Barkov as a person, even though he's not his head coach. So let's play that clip provided to us by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
We're able to bring our families and our kids and everybody in the organization came out. We're able to hold the Stanley Cup. It's one of the few times that it wasn't in an ocean or in a party. And he's so inspiring. I love for all the guys to see him over there. It's been an electrifying run that they've had the last 3 seasons, and he's a major part of it. And yes, he has the talent. But then when you start diving into what everybody says about his character, his leadership, his mentorship, it's about all the right things, but he moves a locker room because of what he's about. That's real talent. I see those kind of possibilities with Bam. But everybody else, it's inspiring to see that. And it is heartbreaking, to see him in crutches, but then you talk to him and you say, oh, no worries, I'll be back in 5 or 6 months. And, I love that spirit. I'm sure their medical staff will be
7 to 9.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I love that guy. I love everything he's about.
I love the end of that quote and video. I love that guy. I love what he's about, and just a humble person to begin with. And he's been like that since he started with the Florida Panthers, and also gave a little bit of a timeline of what he's going to about his recovery. And he said, casually, I'll be back 5 to 6 months. Yeah, he doesn't get to decide that, but very optimistic on what he on him trying to be back for the stretch run for the Panthers. And listen, it's a little bit too optimistic in my opinion, where it's not just the ACL, but it's the MCL as well that he tore. And the minimum of 7 months, yeah, it brings you to late April. And Barkov, once again, Barkov does not decide when he comes back. And if he were to come back earlier than what the initial timeline is that going to hurt the long-term future for the Panthers? Yeah, they have, like we said even in the first segment, you signed Niko Mikkola and the rest of the 10 other guys because you believe that you can win a good amount in the short term once again. But do you want to come back earlier than expected, and then you hurt even the future years after 2025, 26? So that's kind of the takeaway. But I think tone matters in how he says it. He just said it very casually. He wasn't saying, I guarantee that I'm coming back in 5 to 6 months. So let's I'm yeah, it's optimistic, but I think that Aleksander Barkov is humble enough to know that it's not necessarily in his hands as far as when he gets activated about and when he goes back on the ice. Yeah, he is in control about how he takes care of himself in rehab and even when he gets on the ice to skate again, and how he put and whether he goes the extra mile to push himself. But he also has to listen to his body on when his body is telling him, all right, enough might be enough for today. And then just go back tomorrow and then try to get the knee moving to and normally like it was before the injury. So I wanted to hear the quote from Spoelstra first and see how he said it versus before giving a reaction here. Because if I was just reading it on text on online and not hearing the full quote first, I might have had a different reaction. So it was more of a casual, oh, I'll be back 5 to 6 months. I believe, I mean, that's Aleksander Barkov's response to a lot of things. But again, it's not his decision. So we will see. And the Panthers will have to evaluate a lot from now until then, because the Panthers are already starting to get thin. They do have the depth in order to make to at least stay afloat throughout the regular season, and it will be a big boost when Matthew Tkachuk does come back, hopefully in that December window that Bill Zito spoke about back on media day, and then hopefully the Panthers will be ready. But I will respect the medical staff's decision if they do decide to ultimately shut him down. But the moves or lack thereof when we get to the trade deadline will tell us everything we need to know about their confidence level of Aleksander Barkov possibly coming back into the lineup. Hopefully come late April. And who knows, maybe it is earlier. Yeah, it still stinks that he's not going to be part of the Olympics for Team Finland, but he's also trying to complete a quest for another Stanley Cup as well. It may be this year, it might be next, but the window and the core being there for the Cats, it's you might not want to push it more than you need to. Just trust the people who are giving you the timeline there, Dr. John Uribe, who did the surgery. So we will see from there, but a very optimistic timeline. And hey, if he is there and he plays to the level that he was, even better. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. On tomorrow's edition of the show, Nick Fairbanks will be back as we will break down the Florida Panthers preseason game against the Tampa Bay Lightning from Tampa, Florida, and what it could come as far as the lineup, as who is left as far as the Panthers to make the tough decisions on. We will come back tomorrow to discuss all of that. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.